Hello and welcome to Maidens of the Spear, where we talk about the Wheel of Time and we have a really good time. And Mary Lou, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about episode 2, Shadows Waiting.
And we knew the name of that episode because we're professionals.
Definitely knew that. Definitely did not have to retake that. Very exciting.
If you did not get to watch our first review of episode 1, first of all, you can watch it right up there. I'll do the YouTube thing. But second of all, we're not going to be using any clips in this review because YouTube is a big dumb crybaby and it throws a tantrum and kicks us off of our live stream when we use clips.
It got angered.
So we'll just paint vivid word pictures.
Yes. But episode 2 opens with one of the most iconic scenes in all 3 episodes, parts of which I'll never forget. You know what I'll say? You know what? That's what I'm going to say. This scene is unforgettable. You know what I'm talking about?
For that one.
You got it. Maybe 2. Let freedom ring with those white cloaks because it's a good old-fashioned white cloak witch burning.
White cloak witch burning, baby.
It's a good old-fashioned white cloak witch burning.
So this is our introduction to Eamon Valda, that a character the show is clearly setting up as a very big bad.
Big old bad. Big old baddie bad.
They want us to hate this guy. They want us to be terrified of this guy. And I think they missed the mark a little bit. I will say, yeah, when I watched this the first time, I was breathless, speechless, breathless, frozen in my chair, clutching the armrests, cold to the bone, chilled by the brutality, to borrow a word from Valda himself, and by the just stunning imagery of this. And it's very well framed. The colors are bright and stark, and it is impressive. I think this was just one of those scenes where sometimes less is more. And I think this scene could have been an iconic scene for the entire show.
A whole show.
And I think it won't be because of Eamon Valda's monologue.
His evil villain monologue.
It pushed what could have been, I think, an incredibly powerful and just creepy scene if they had just been comfortable showing us Eamon Valda eating, even happily eating, his weird crunchy little bird and watching this woman burn to death. And I think we as an audience are smart enough to understand that if this man is happy to watch this woman burn to death and then maybe walk over and pull her ring off of her severed hand, I think that's enough. The addition of his monologue, you know about these crunchy little birds that done cut your mouth up so nice and bloody?
Brutality is a path to mercy.
It's just it pushed it into cartoon, children's cartoon supervillain territory for me.
Yeah.
It pushed it into Ramsay Bolton, just too disgustingly reveling in its own violence.
Here's why I didn't like it. Who's he talking to? He's talking to a woman who's bound and gagged and can't respond, who's about to die, and there's no one else around. So he's not talking to himself.
Yeah.
He's talking to the audience. And that is cheesy. And I think what is so impressive about the scene is not the dialogue that he says. I almost forgot about it. When I first watched the scene, I almost wasn't listening to what he was saying because I was so struck by the imagery. And so rewatching it, when I really got to focus on what he was saying, was like, oh, that's way too much. It would have been just as powerful, if not more so, without it. And we're going to get a scene later with Valda that I think, Mary Lou, I think is better and is a better example of Valda's specific flavor of evil. But this
Yeah.
scene, while gorgeous and emotionally impactful, was over the top.
It was over the top. It was extra, which is kind of a theme with some of what we've seen from the show so far.
Mm-hmm.
And since you mentioned flavors of evil, I was kind of disappointed. I've been disappointed so far with the direction they've taken Valda.
Mm-hmm.
Turning him into this just like joyous little psychopath a la Ramsay Bolton. I don't think that's a character that adds a ton to the themes of the Wheel of Time because we have Trollocs, because we know we will see Forsaken who do that so much better than Eamon Valda could ever do
Yeah.
that.
I was ready to disagree with you when you first told me this until I remembered how they're characterizing Eamon Valda now is exactly how I picture Padden Fane.
Yeah, Padden Fane
So,
will be that too.
Will be this sort of like psychopathic, deliciously reveling in violence and evil and poison, right? So I'm like, now I'm like totally agree with you that I hope they can differentiate him from Padden Fane in that way.
Yeah. I like what I wish we'd seen because we just haven't seen this yet from the show. I wish they'd taken Eamon Valda and made him a child Bayar, like banality of evil, a man who does horrendous, torturous things like watching a woman burn alive, taking the rings from her severed hands, and feels nothing about it because he's just doing his job. And I think that would have been way scarier, way spookier, and like get at something that I think the White Cloaks are meant to get at in a better way. But instead, he's just a Ramsay, and that is what it is. Like what I'm calling him a Ramsay because I'm afraid he will be like a true Ramsay. I'm afraid he's just going to get plot armor. He's going to show up again and again. I'm going to have to constantly watch his dumb little smile. And like, kudos to the actor. I fucking hate that character.
Oh God, he's good at being evil. I hope he ends up more like a Joffrey.
Yeah.
Where Joffrey and Ramsay were both just like evil, but one was plot armored and just could do no wrong and was around every corner and got everything right. And Joffrey was just like a sick, twisted son of a bitch who got his comeuppance, but made sense. Right. I don't know. We'll see. We're gonna keep our eyes on this one, folks.
While we're on the topic of Eamon Valda, let's just skip to that White Cloak scene number 2. We'll go a little non-chronologically.
Great. I would love to talk about that scene because that was one of my favorite scenes in definitely the whole episode. Maybe even all 3. Honestly, I loved it.
Yeah.
Because it was so viscerally creepy.
Very uncomfortable to watch.
In a way that was much more, the pot on the lid of boiling water than like a bloody woman with her hands cut off being burned at the stake, know? But the way he so calmly and so casually just touched her body and just felt her hips and her back and her shoulders without asking was, as a woman, made my skin crawl.
Oh, it's gross. And especially knowing like
how dangerous he is.
But also knowing how powerful Moiraine is and like watching her have to sit and take this.
Yeah. It was a lot. That was an emotional scene for me.
Yeah. That does so much more to establish the White Cloak's power and the depths of Eamon Valda's grossness.
Yes.
It is a good scene. I do think the actual questioning was stupid. Ask her to say she's not an Aes Sedai. The thing is, like, I put that on Twitter. I was like, if I were White Cloak, I'd just ask women to say I'm not an Aes Sedai. People are like, well, they don't believe the Aes Sedai actually follow the 3 oaths. And that's okay. Ask her to do it. If she can't say I'm not an Aes Sedai, she's
proof.
an Aes Sedai.
Yeah.
If she does say I'm not an Aes Sedai, that doesn't mean anything. She could be lying.
Yeah, then she could still be an Aes Sedai. But if she can't say it, then she definitely is an Aes Sedai.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, Sarah brought that up. And honestly, Sarah's right. Like that question would be the question to end all questions. So if he's a questioner, like that's the question I would ask. However, we know that if he did ask that question, like there would be no scene, there would be no show. They'd kill Maureen on the spot at the end, right? Like
There's ways around it. Like I think that's where we could have really seen, like Aes Sedai,
right,
like
because she'd respond,
trying in
"I'm
action.
no witch."
She'd say,
You
"I'm no
know?
witch." She'd say, like, "Well, like, I'm telling you right now, I'm not an Aes Sedai." Like, I
I'm
think
a
that could
lady.
arguably pass. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I think it could have been interesting, but just because it's hard, like, they chose to put themselves in the position of introducing this party to the White Cloaks. Like,
Right.
that's a change they made.
Yeah,
And
and Maureen does such a good job. Part of I think the purpose of this scene that Sarah and I have talked about is the purpose of the scene is to show how Aes Sedai lie, right? The truth is not what you think you hear.
yeah,
So they and I think does a really good job of showing that. So then show us the nuclear option, right? Of how she
yeah.
gets around the question of, are you an Aes Sedai? I am no witch. I am a lady from Kyrian Inn. And I am telling you right now, I am no Aes Sedai, right? Like that would have been super cool.
Yeah. Like the show can make changes. They have made changes. They will make many more. And
Absolutely.
like I'm not saying don't make a change. This was a change. Having Moraine at all run into the White Cloaks does not happen. They wanted to show us some things. But if you're going to make that change, you can't shy away from the consequences of what you're doing. And to me, that felt like a cop out, not having them ask that question. Um,
Yeah, it's
but
conspicuous. Once Sarah pointed it out to me, it's conspicuous. I love that scene, and I don't want them to take it out of the episode at all because I'm obsessed with it. I thought it was so good.
yeah,
And because I also really loved the interaction between Jeffrem and Eamon Valda. In
yeah,
just a few lines, we got a lot of information about the relationship between the children and the questioners, between Jeffrem's, feelings towards Eamon Valda and the questioners at all, and their difference. Right? There's they're foil characters. I
I
loved that
think
scene, but you have to deal with the consequences
I think
of
that
making those choices.
that exchange at the end between Jeffrem and Eamon Valda is probably the best showing, not telling we get from the first two episodes.
That's terrific. I
There's a
think you
lot
make a
of
great point there. Yeah.
there's a lot of telling in these episodes.
Which
Um,
I get it. So at some point you have to, right?
yeah,
But there's another way. And this is a good example of that. The way that they speak to each other, the questioners have a higher purpose,
yeah,
right?
it's
Tells
great.
me how
That
they
part's
think
well
about
done.
each other.
Exactly. Um, okay, so
What happens next?
they are just riding
Ooh,
around. We get "Weep for Manetheren,"
weep
the
for
song.
Manetheren.
I wish I could play the clip because I specifically cut that clip out because I wanted to hear it again with all of you. It's a cool song. I love it.
It's
Like I
good.
I love a lot of the like Western vibe we get, especially in a lot of the music that comes through. Um, it's very cool. But I loved that song. Um,
It's good. And the performance of it is good. A lot of songs stuck into TV shows or movies feel very conspicuous. This one didn't feel
no,
weird to me. It felt like this is what you would do when you're like riding with your friends. And it
felt like
felt like just people singing. It didn't feel like,
yeah,
all of a sudden there's like reverb and autotune that sometimes happens.
yeah, exactly. They're not belting. It's just like four country kids singing a folk song as they ride down a trail. I liked it.
Perrin's bass line,
Yeah.
oof, love.
Then we get Moraine's version of the Manetheren story. I thought it was okay. It doesn't have nearly the impact it does in the books, just because she's like kind of sharing it as a little fun fact with these four kids while they ride a horse rather than like spinning a giant flaming staff in front of a whole like rioting village worth of people.
Yeah.
I mean, they had to get that information to the audience, I guess, and that is a kind of classic example of telling. She just straight up tells you,
Yeah.
which is fine. What else are
Yeah.
you gonna do?
I'm not too mad at it.
I'm not mad at it. It's just like I thought it was just fine. It was like a very functional scene.
Yeah, it was fine, especially since we got the story of Manetheren in the Origins with that
The
episode.
animated things.
The animated Wheel of Time Origins series.
Yeah. It is true. I mean, obviously they can't like bank on anyone watching those.
True.
But it is cool that those exist. We'll talk about those on Monday probably.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then we get they stop for the night. They stop in that this is like exactly that scene from The Eye of the World where they have this like hollowed out underneath a tree trunk thing that Lan has stored some bags, and I loved that.
And they sleep restfully, and everybody
And nothing
wakes
happens.
up and stretching and yawning, and
Yeah.
they have a great night's sleep. The end.
Well, so before they go to sleep and have a great night's sleep, we get Moraine talking to Eggy about her powers.
Right. Or yeah, this is after they go to sleep, but she like oddly wakes her up with like these like hand, ooh, wake up, and Egwene awakes, and they talk about powers.
And they had a really awkward scene where they have Egwene stare into Moraine's Cassiera, her blue gem. And
I liked the way that Moraine talked to Egwene. I liked the conversation they had. I liked how she explained it as, what do they call it? Listening to the wind. You don't listen to the wind, Egwene. The wind listens to you. I loved that conversation. Looking at the stone.
Yeah, I was just so distracted by the stone. And
was like awkward.
Some of the one power in the show has been very cool. I thought Moraine's fighting the Trollocs. That was
cool.
The weird little warble around the blue stone. Looks like cheesy as heck to me. They didn't even
hearing the water rushing like. Whoosh,
oh god, yeah, that was so cheesy. Like this is just not a subtle show, y'all.
It was a bit much. It was a bit much for not enough. You know what I mean? It was a lot of effect for not a lot of payoff. Just the stone kind of went like bloop, a couple times.
We'll have to ask Vic tomorrow when we do our non-reader review. If I didn't know what was happening in that scene, I think I would have been confused as hell. Because like afterwards, Moraine is like, the first 2 times, that was me. The third one, that was you.
The third what?
The third what? Like it took
sort
me being
of flashes?
Like, oh, that's that scene? Okay, so that's what happened. We'll see what Vic thinks about that tomorrow. I'm very intrigued.
Yeah, okay. Same. Sorry, my cat will yell at me unless I give him a hug. So he's here with us now, for now.
Of course, Fat Boy's always welcome on the stream.
This is Fat Boy, yeah.
So then we get Rand al'Thor's disgusting little bat dream.
Bat barf. He barfs up a bat.
Totally grody. I was like very uncomfortable watching
it. It was gnarly.
That's fine. That's not a criticism. That's
in a good way. It's supposed to be gnarly. It's gnarly. And then when he wakes up and sees the bat on the ground, and he like, and I did the same thing. When I saw the bat in real life, I was like, oh shit.
Yeah. We also get our first little look at Balsamon, kind of.
Balsamon, kind of.
Fiery
yeah.
eyes.
Yeah, we definitely saw a dude with fiery eyes. That's for freaking sure.
It's pretty CG. I don't know about y'all, and I don't know how it's described in the books. I always imagine Balsamon as like a guy who had fire eyes. This one's not that, but whatever.
He's definitely more stylized. It's fine. We'll get more of him, and maybe it'll be, I don't know. We'll see. But
yes. Moraine is sick. We can't go on. We have to go to Shadar Logoth.
Yeah, we gotta go to Shadar Logoth.
They do that. Rand walks around. He and Egwene hold hands.
Oh, you know what moment we forgot to talk about that's really funny that this is reminding me of is when they make it onto the ferry. When they get onto the ferry and the ferry's pulling away and the Trollocs are like, and they're about like, I don't know, 20 feet away.
Yeah. It's very
But
silly.
nobody has a bow and an arrow. They only had one throwing knife, apparently, and they used it
Yeah.
up already and it disappeared
Uh,
because they just go like, oh,
oh, you.
you,
That's the true
oh,
tragedy.
no. And the
Carl.
same thing. Yeah, Carl, the only one throwing knife, and he threw it away and didn't pick it back up, I guess.
Yeah, it's so wild. Like you're sitting there, there's a shot from behind the trolley cord where the raft is clearly like 20, 30 feet from them. No one
Not that
even
far.
tries to throw a spear.
They don't even try.
Oh, you got us, you meddling kids.
Oh, no.
Very
And then the
silly.
same thing happens when they're going into Shadar Logoth.
Yeah, they're right
And the
there. They're 10 feet
Trollocs,
away.
the Trollocs like chase them in, and the Trollocs are like, "Oh, dang it! There
And
they
and I guess
go!"
like the Trollocs aren't supposed to kill them, but like also in the attack on Winter Night, those Trollocs would have killed them. Like it's not like they were just hacking and mauling. I don't
Yeah,
know. It's
it was
it's
funny.
very funny to me. Very
It's funny.
silly. Just like
We're not mad
okay.
about it. It's just funny.
It's very funny.
But anyway, they go into Shadar Logoth. We get the story from Lan because Moiraine is half
Oh, we
dead.
also get the whirlpool there, which
Oh,
is
right, the
fine.
whirlpool.
Like that's just a thing that happens in the books.
Right
But
from the books.
then Mr. Master Hightower swims in after the fairy and dies. Dumb. Don't do that, sir.
Awkward. Not a good choice.
Very silly.
Not smart, Mr. Hightower.
Then like
But
everyone
they were
yeah.
never very smart in Terran Fairy, were they?
No, they weren't. These Terran fairy folk, this
Those
whole town
Terran
of
Fairy folk.
ostensibly one house. Um
Right?
Yeah, and I
Um,
think this moment is supposed to be some moral gray or like show you why the immense fielders might mistrust Moraine. Like, I can't believe you did that to this man.
she
I
sinks his
just,
fairy, his whole livelihood,
I'm
separating
not,
him from his family.
I don't know about y'all. I wasn't convinced.
No,
Like,
it's pretty obvious they made the right choice.
what else was she supposed to do?
Yeah.
Let
I
the
mean,
Trollocs cross the river?
to be fair, I thought the same thing when I read that moment in the books. Like Rand and Egwene are like, I can't believe you did that. You sunk his fairy.
Yeah.
And at the time I was like, what else was she gonna do? Dumb. And it's even more obvious in the show to me. And they
When you
tried to make
actually
it
watch
more
it.
when you actually see it happen and there's like hundreds of Trollocs on the other side, and he's like, I'm just gonna ride my boat over. It's like, okay.
Anyway, so that happened.
Anyway.
Eventually they get to Shadow Logoth, and it's fine. It looks pretty good.
It's really cool. It looks
very
beautiful.
cool. I love the
Lan
interior of that church.
Lan says more words than he has up to this point, which Matt literally calls out, and it's
Yeah.
very funny.
I was thinking that exact thing. Like I was watching Lan talk, and I'm like, this is out of character. Lan would not talk this much. And then Matt is like, you've said more words than you've ever said in your life. I'm like, all right.
Yep.
Fair play,
Correct.
show.
Yeah, fair play. Yeah, it's scary. It's spooky. We get the story of Eridol. We get this gorgeous shot of Rand looking out over the city alone, and then Egwene joins him. It's kind of lovely. And then in the night, Matt wakes up and just has a feeling there might be something interesting around the corner.
Yeah.
Or no, he sees a shadow.
Eventually, he hears something. The horses are like whinnying or something, and he walks out, sees a shadow, which maybe is Patton Fane.
Maybe that's Patton Fane. Maybe that's Mordath.
Then he finds the dagger, not in a hoard of treasure.
Nope.
But just there.
Just in a box.
You know, Mary Lou and I have a slight difference of opinion here. Not an important one.
Right.
I just think it's an interesting choice to make it so that Matt just like finds the dagger and he picks it up because he's like, oh dang, what's this? Because in the books, Matt takes that shit out of greed, and Matt like knows the rule, and he's actively like, no, you said not to accept any gifts. I took this myself.
Right. And that part I agree with Sarah, that like in the books it's much more clear that he knows he's breaking a rule.
Yeah.
In the show I don't think it's clear that he knows he's breaking a rule. However, I disagree that I do think it's from greed. I think he sees that box underneath the stones and it looks like it's like a nice box and isn't damaged, and I think he's like, oh shit, what can I get from that box that I could sell later? And the evidence that makes me believe that comes later in episode 3. But I still think he takes it from greed, although I do admit that Sarah's point that like something happens and he just sort of slips it in his pocket and is like, oh, what's happening? Yeah, it does make it look like he's just like has it in his hand when something else happens and he's like, oh shit, yeah, coming. I still think he takes it from greed, but it's not as explicit and as blatant as it is in the books.
Right. And as Marisa in our chat is saying, Lan said, touch nothing. Lan did say that. You can't exist inside a city and touch nothing. Like Rand and Egwene climb a tower. They're touching all sorts of things. I don't know. The rule was unclear, I think. So they do that. Mashadar is a big spooky blackness. It eats a horse. We knew that. We saw that in the trailer.
Turned it to ash. It's definitely different from Mashadar, right? It follows surfaces. And it looks like more of like an infection as opposed to a mist. And it's not like it touches everything. Like it seems to cover absolutely every square inch of the city of Eridol at once. So it's not like it's only in some parts sometimes. It's just like at this point of the night, everything goes. It all goes, you know?
It's weird. It like moves around. It's too slow to catch them. Like when we're zoomed in on our heroes, it's too slow to catch them. But then in the shot when Perrin and Egwene are up on top of the wall, as my dear, sweet, wonderful girlfriend Magu pointed out, then it moves fast enough to eat the entire city in like 5 seconds. So it's very convenient. It's a conveniently sped up monster. Whatever. That's how movie monsters work.
I think it's really interesting that it's not like a thing that moves around. It's the whole city. It's just like the whole city goes like covered in this infection all
that's
at
why
once.
I always imagined the fog as well.
Oh, that's not how I pictured it. I pictured it as like a thing that like moved and traveled like a worm
like
burrowing through the dirt.
In Lost.
Yeah. But like a worm burrowing through the dirt is how they describe it in the books. I just pictured it as
a
like
fog. Isn't it a fog with tendrils and shit?
Yes, they describe it as being mindless like a worm burrowing through the dirt. And yeah, so I didn't picture it being like citywide.
Interesting. But it is what it is. Matt and Rand break through a window and swim away on a log. They do that.
Just a couple of bros on a log.
It's very shallow where they are. Perrin and Egwene jump off of a 300-foot high wall.
And luckily it's very deep where they are.
So that's fine.
Luckily.
They cross the river. Apparently incredibly different places because Matt and
when I looked at the map, which was my mistake, because then I saw some spoilers for episode 4 that they have accidentally already put up. So don't do that if you don't want that. When I looked at the map, which shows where Rand and Matt end up and where Perrin and Egwene end up, they end up in very different places.
Yeah, they're very different places. Someone in our chat is pointing out that they're very worried for Bella. How can she escape that situation? I'm afraid she can't. We don't see... The only horses who seem to survive are Mandarb and Aldib. So...
Yeah.
Bella
does have a bio on the website, though.
Very
so
sad.
That's fun. But yeah, I'm afraid Bella got aided.
The final scene, Lan carries Moraine out of Shadar Logoth, and then we get the knife, and oh my god, Nynaeve, it's Nynaeve. She wasn't eaten by Trollocs.
It's not Nynaeve, it's Knife-Neve, and she's pissed.
Turns out this character who's all over the promotional materials and who had a few very important scenes in episode 1 isn't dead.
She's not dead?
Wild.
She's on every poster, but she's not dead? That's crazy. Shocking.
But yeah, there are a lot of issues with episodes 1 and 2, but I will say that last shot, I was like, well, now I got to see episode 3.
Yeah. Yeah. What I loved about episode 2, it made me wanting way more. It settled a little bit into the pace, didn't feel as breakneck as episode 1. I loved the character development that we got. Rand and his angry sort of tantrum with Moraine at the tree trunk is, honestly, I liked it. Like it felt outsized. It felt too angry and too stubborn. And that's why I liked it. Right? Because we're gonna find out why. right? We know why Rand is upset, but like the show is going to tell
better
us
find
later.
out why. So what, Mary Lou, what you're coyly referencing
What I'm
is,
referencing.
at least in the books, Rand is very upset at this point because he has heard Tam's mutterings that indicate Tam might not be his real father. And so like Rand is dealing with all that shit. Correct me if I'm wrong that this is what you're referencing.
That is what I'm referencing.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we are predicting there will be a flashback to when Rand is bringing Tam to the Emmons Field after the Trolloc attack. And that's when we'll see Tam talking about the blood snow or something. So, like, we think Rand has this information, and we, the audience, just don't know Rand has it yet. If it turns out he doesn't, it would be very weird that he reacted that way.
I don't think it would be very weird, and here's why I'll say that. It's because we just had the scene previous of him fighting with Egwene and being really upset with her, and I came out here to be alone. Do I think that he's being a little...
The whole audience was like, oh, shit.
Oh, burn. Yeah, it's true. We were all like, oh, damn. And do I think he's being a little bitch about it? Yes. But he is still like a 20-year-old boy. And so I really liked that, like, angry Rand is angry and I'm going to take it out on you.
Well, she's also like, she just broke up with him.
Yeah.
And now he has to fucking travel with her.
Yeah, I mean, why he took it out on Moiraine. He's pissed at Egwene, and Egwene likes Moiraine, and so he's like taking out his anger on Moiraine instead of Egwene. I really liked that.
She also destroyed his favorite inn, which we didn't talk about in our episode 1 review.
Yes, anyway. one of my favorite like shots is Moiraine collapsing and the wine spring inn collapsing behind her at the same time. Great shot. Was that necessary, Moiraine?
To destroy the wine spring inn?
You couldn't find some rocks or something from elsewhere? You had to destroy the wine spring inn?
Air, like we know
you can't just like slash them with air like you've been doing for the past 5 minutes. Anyway.
We're not talking about episode 1.
We're not talking about it. Loved episode 2.
I thought episode 2 was fine.
It's good.
It was better than episode 1, but I didn't think either episode 1 or episode 2 were great. I would say they were both like, B-, B, like fairly solid start to a show that have potential is how I felt about them. Yeah. But also were indicative of enough potential failings that it had me spiraling all day today.
Totally. But episode 3, y'all, really tied it all up for me.
But if you want to hear our thoughts on episode 3, you'll have to go to the next video.
That's
because we're done with our episode 2 review.
All done.
I'm Sarah Kaplan. You can find me on Twitter at SpearMaidens.
And I'm Mary Lou, and you can find me at Mary Lou Larry Moo on Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch.
And this is Maidens of the Spear, where we talk about the Wheel of Time, and we have a really good time. We hope you had a really good time, because we know we did.